enclosure that our really very fearful snake and shy snake Mesmer lives in. And this, by the way, is a likeness of Mesmer that was made by Danielle Anise and sent to me as a gift. And when I first received it and put it up here, I kept walking into the room and thinking that Mesmer had gotten out and was somehow sitting on top of his enclosure, which I actually wish he would do because he's so fearful. But he's inside his humid hide. And so I'm going to take this as a teaching opportunity to show you guys how I handle cleaning and enclosure maintenance on really shy and fearful snakes. Now, he is a royal python. I find that they're very clean snakes. They do not eliminate very often at all. They don't need to eat very often. They don't eliminate very often. And he is very clean. He doesn't really mess up his enclosure. The only thing that I clean on a regular basis is his water. And then wherever he has shed and eliminated. And he recently shed. I knew that he was in blue, so I'm going to show you how I manage this situation. He's in his humid hide and very unlikely to come out. But just in case, I'm going to move the rock that's under his one of his basking areas over that hole just to make sure he doesn't come out, because I don't want to risk any kind of accidental interaction that could be aversive to him. And I'm going to remove his hide. And you see that he's eliminated under there and he recently shed. And there is one small spot of urate there in the corner, and then where he just eliminated, that is fresh. So really, this is the first time that he's eliminated in several weeks, and the rest of his enclosure is clean. So I'm just going to clean this out, and I'm going to clean his water dish. All the while, he's in his humid hide. Voluntarily, he chose to be in there. I just noticed he was in there, and so I'm taking this as an opportunity to do the maintenance that I need, and that way I don't have to disturb him or bother him whatsoever. Okay, so I picked up the messes and the shed from under his hide. I picked up some of his substrate along with it. I left the rest of the substrate, and I wiped off the exterior of his hide, but I didn't wipe off the inside because his pheromones and the scents from his body that he wants in there to mark his territory, that he wants in there to make it familiar, I left. So I just wiped off the outside of the hide. I'm putting that back in there. I'm putting his planter back in here exactly where it was. I'm just going to go and clean his water dish. I did clean out the substrate from underneath his water and from the edges of his water, because that's what tends to get wet. And I want to make sure that that doesn't get moldy or anything. And so I cleaned out around and under his water dish. I'm going to now go clean his water dish, and then I will put that back in and we'll be finished. This is really quick and easy and doesn't take long at all. His water's now nice and clean. The area around his water's clean. I spot cleaned his enclosure. There's no messes anywhere else. I'm going to put his rock back over here on top of his hide where it was. And he's still in his humid hide. I haven't had to touch him, handle him, bother him. Hopefully he wasn't frightened by the activity going on out here. I've been doing this now for about 1.5 years, so hopefully he's used to it by now. And he is starting to come further and further out of his hide during our target training sessions. And my goal eventually is to get him to come all the way out. But now he's coming out of his hide when we target train, and he's making it all the way to this rock. So that's really a lot of progress for him. And my goal with him is just to make him less and less fearful of me, more and more comfortable with his surroundings, and for him to learn that he doesn't have to be frightened of me, of where he lives, and that he's safe and secure here. The best way that I can do that is let him passively habituate to all of the activity outside of his enclosure, to do active habituation through target training with him, to let him learn over time that he doesn't have to be afraid here, and he can come out of his hide and watch what's going on outside of the enclosure when he chooses to, but no one's going to force him to do that. And I absolutely never ever bother him when he is in this hide. That is his safe place. If he is in his humid hide, or if he is in this hide, I do not bother him. I do not touch him. I don't force him out. The most I ever do is lift it up to make sure that he's breathing and then put it back down, and I don't do that very often. Occasionally, if he's in his humid hide, I will lift it out and set it aside, and that would be if I needed to clean around the humid hide, or if I wanted to give him an opportunity to interact with things outside of his enclosure. I might put his humid hide in an activity tent or in an activity space and let him stick his head out if he chooses, or sniff the air, or investigate if he chooses. But that is all I do. He has to understand, as all organisms do, that they have at least one location that's 100% safe, that they can 100% fully relax in and know that they are safe and that nobody is going to bother them. We all, as living things, need to have that safe space. And if no space in our life is safe where we can 100% relax and don't have to worry about being bothered or frightened or having anybody force us to do anything against our will, then we are going to have generalized anxiety and generalized fear, and we are never going to be able to 100% relax. All animals need a safe space where they can 100% let go and relax and feel like, I don't have to worry in here, nobody's going to bother me. And for Mesmer, that is this black hide. The only time I interact with him when he's in this hide is when he chooses to stick his head out. That's when I initiate target training. That's when I might sit outside of his enclosure and read or work on my computer. And I don't limit my activity outside of his enclosure. I do my normal activity outside of his enclosure, so he is free to see what's going on or not. That's his choice. And he oftentimes does stick his head out and watch what is going on outside of his enclosure. And that includes watching me work with the snakes next door and train them. And as I said, he's now targeting out of his enclosure at least as far as this rock, which is a huge improvement for him. I don't mist enclosures very often. When I do mist enclosures, I mist through the screen top or through any openings if there are openings. And the reason I do it that way is most snakes don't like to directly be sprayed with water. Some do, but it's rare. And the other thing it does is it sort of simulates a mist or rain. You can even see, let me open this enclosure again. You can see the water droplets coming through the screen and dripping onto the soil or the substrate and dripping onto the humid hide. And so by doing it this way, as that water falls from the top, it simulates a little rain shower, or sprinkles really, because it's not pouring down in droves. But you can see that those drops are falling in his water dish as I'm misting above it. And that's a much more natural way to simulate moisture than directly spraying your snake or directly spraying inside of the habitat. I like to do it this way because also then over the next few hours, these droplets will drip down into the soil, into his water dish, onto his cork bark or whatever. And if he wants to be underneath it and allow those to hit him, he can. So I just thought I would share that with you. So it was very interesting that the evening after I had cleaned his enclosure and misted it and done all of the disturbances on the water change, Mesmer actually moved from his humid hide back to his regular hide. And then later in the evening, he came out. I walked into the room and this is how I found him. And he didn't move when I came up to the enclosure. And that's good and bad. When I say he didn't move, I mean he literally didn't move. He was frozen. This behavior you see is not comfortable and relaxed. He is freezing. And he's not freezing to assess. This isn't a pause and then he continued to do whatever he was doing before I came in. He remained frozen for the entire time that I was there. He didn't retreat back into his hide, which I think could be construed as a positive. I think he felt safe enough here because he was in this bush, this fake bush that I've made out of this plastic thing and these vines. And I think he didn't expect me to walk up, and his natural reaction was just to freeze. And he literally was frozen like a statue, not moving. I didn't even see him breathing. He did not once move a muscle, so he was very tense. His body was taut. He did not tongue flick at all. And so after obtaining this footage, I just left the room and let him be. Now here we are 2 nights after his enclosure clean out, and after that night I found him out by the water, and he's in his hide with his head sticking out. And I'll zoom in here in a minute, but I want to say that he was completely out of his hide. And then when I walked over to the habitat, he darted back into his hide immediately, but he turned around and stuck his head and just the first part of his neck out. Here you can see that he's in his hide, but he's at the door and he's looking out. And in just a minute, something really exciting is going to happen. Really exciting for this snake. Look at him move. This was about 45 seconds into the session. I'd just been patiently waiting there with the target, and he suddenly decided to come out and move, and he's tongue flicking. He's looking to the right of the target from his point of view, which is usually where I deliver the reinforcement. So I move the reinforcement in front of the target, because I do want him to focus a little bit more on the target than what he was doing there. But I was also really thrilled that he didn't take the reinforcer and snatch it away and go back into his hide. He took the reinforcer and he stayed out, and this is a new behavior for him. So I'm really thrilled with this. This is repetition 2 on the same night. So he's doing 2 repetitions in one session, which is also great for him. He didn't go back into his hide, which is why we're doing a second repetition. He's got his head laying on this rock here. I was really happy to see that he was still out. He ate while he was out. He didn't go back into his hide. And when I came back 30 minutes later or so, he was resting his head on his hide. Now I have to unlock the enclosure and open the doors, and he stays on that rock. And I have, incidentally, move that rock closer to the door. It used to be halfway between his hide and the door, and now it's more close to the door than it is to his hide. All right, so I present him with the target, and it takes him over 3 minutes to make a move this time. So we're going to just cut ahead a little bit here. I'm going to zoom in so that you can see Mesmer's adorable little face, but I'm not going to make you sit through 3 minutes of me just sitting here holding the target. I've cut out several minutes of him just resting there, and you'll notice that I did move the target from his right side to his left side. Now watch really closely here. Watch his body language. He starts to move, and he's just moving ever so slightly, but he started to move. So as soon as he moved his body, he looked a little bit to his right, he started tongue flicking. I present the reinforcement. I know that he didn't move forward and towards the target, but he reacted, he moved, he started tongue flicking, and he was looking to the right of the target. I wanted to deliver that reinforcement immediately and reward that behavior. But I did move the reinforcer over to where I had the target, and I didn't move it closer to him for several reasons. I didn't want to startle him by putting the food in his face, and I also wanted to use it a little bit as a lure to get him to come forward a little bit more and towards the target and towards the reinforcement and move forward. I was really thrilled that when he snatched it, and he did snatch it this time, that he didn't retreat back into his hide. He moved forward, he snatched the reinforcer, but he stayed out. And he ate it while he was out and while he was visible, and he didn't take it back into hiding with him. And I feel like for this particular snake, for Mesmer, that he has made huge leaps and bounds in this session and in even the last week or two with coming out more. His confidence level has gone up. Now, I realize that he's still extremely reactive and shy compared to many, many other snakes that we work with here in the program, but I can't compare him to other snakes. I have to compare his behavior to his behavior in the past and recognize that he is becoming more confident, he is learning, and that we are seeing positive steps forward in his behavior. So behavior change is happening with him, even though from the human point of view, it's happening very, very slowly. It's happening.